Welcome to Hard Script.
Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories. She said it during a casual dinner, as if she were reading the weather forecast. You were never that good in bed anyway. No anger, no emotion, just cold detachment, like she was correcting a detail on a grocery list. I sat there frozen, the fork halfway to my mouth. Her words didn't just land, they detonated. And she kept eating, unfazed, sipping her wine like nothing happened. No apology, no glance, nothing. Her name's Rachel, my wife of 4 years. The woman I thought I knew. The one I defended in front of friends, supported through job changes, carried through family grief. That woman just looked at me like I was disposable, like my worth could be measured by one insult and thrown away in a sentence. That night, she went to bed early, rolled over, back facing me, like I didn't even exist. But the silence in the room wasn't emptiness. It was the beginning of something else. A shift, a recalibration. That was the night I stopped asking why and started asking, how do I end this? It wasn't the insult. It was what came with it. The indifference, the weaponized boredom, the way she knew exactly where to hit and didn't hesitate. You don't say things like that unless you've thought them before. Rehearse them. Save them like bullets in your pocket, ready to fire. But what she didn't expect, what she never saw coming, was silence in return. I didn't react. Not then. Not the next morning when she kissed me on the cheek like nothing happened. Not when she asked me to take the trash out or pick up almond milk. I nodded. I smiled. And I started documenting everything. Because this story wasn't going to end with a raised voice. It was going to end with her wondering how it all disappeared. Every routine, every benefit, every drop of validation she squeezed from this marriage was going to dry up. Quietly. That was the plan. And her friend? The one who casually let it slip weeks later that you weren't bad at all. That was just gasoline on the fire. Because now I knew something deeper. Rachel wasn't just cruel. She was lying. To herself and to me. And I was done playing the fool. This wasn't about revenge. This was about closure with precision. This was the first move of a man who wasn't interested in arguing anymore. Just erasing. Silently. Completely. After that night, I stopped being her husband in the ways that mattered. But she didn't notice. Not right away. That's the thing about people like Rachel. They confuse silence with submission. They think because you didn't raise your voice, you must be weak. They never consider that you might be watching, calculating. I started waking up earlier. She'd still be asleep when I left the house. No breakfast together. No pointless small talk while brushing teeth. I'd take my car keys and go, locking the doors softly behind me like a man exiting a crime scene. At work, I buried myself in numbers and tasks. Stayed late. Took on extra projects. I made sure my time had purpose, even if my marriage didn't anymore. And when I came home, she'd already be deep in some reality show or scrolling endlessly on her phone, barely glancing up. I used to hate that. Now I welcomed it. The less eye contact, the less chance she had to see I was already gone. I began detaching everything quietly. Bank accounts, passwords, subscriptions. I opened a new credit card, in my name only. Transferred my direct deposit. Created a digital paper trail of independence. I wasn't just preparing to leave. I was preparing to vanish. Rachel never asked questions. She assumed I was sulking. She thought a cold shoulder was just a phase, something I'd eventually crawl back from with flowers and apologies. She didn't know I was beyond apology. I wasn't angry. That would have meant I still cared. What I felt was something sharper, strategy. I was playing chess in a game she didn't know had started. The moment everything shifted was a Friday evening. I walked in, and she was on the phone, laughing. Loud. Flirtatious. Too loud for whoever it was. When she saw me, she turned her back, lowered her voice. That was the confirmation I didn't need, but it helped. I didn't ask who it was. Didn't slam a door. Didn't accuse. I just walked past her, grabbed a beer from the fridge, and headed to the spare room. I had already moved half my clothes in there. She thought it was temporary. She even joked once, sleeping in the doghouse tonight, with a forced laugh. I smiled, but I didn't answer. Because dogs wait at the door. I wasn't waiting anymore. The man she used to know, the man she criticized, undermined, withheld from, that man was dissolving. Every hour I spent in that separate bed, I grew colder, clearer, lighter. I was becoming someone else. Someone she couldn't touch anymore. 3 weeks after I moved to the spare room, something happened that killed whatever was left of the man she married. And oddly enough, it didn't come from her. It came from one of her friends. Her name was Dana, one of Rachel's loud, overly opinionated friends who always hovered too close, always acted a little too familiar with me. I'd seen the way she looked at me, the way her voice changed when Rachel left the room. But I kept my distance. Not because I was loyal, those days were gone, but because I had a plan. And distractions weren't part of it. That Saturday night, Rachel invited Dana over for wine and gossip. I wasn't supposed to be home, but I came back earlier than expected. I moved quietly, heading straight to the office room to grab a folder. That's when I heard my name. Rachel's voice, wine-thick and arrogant. Honestly, I think he just doesn't know what he's doing. In bed, I mean. It's like, underwhelming. Every single time. Then Dana, laughing, but her tone dropped. Are you serious? That's not how I remember it. Silence. Then nervous laughter. Rachel stammered. Wait, what do you mean? Dana chuckled, realizing she'd said too much. I mean, he doesn't seem the type to be clueless, that's all. But I didn't need more. I'd heard enough. I stood there in the hallway, motionless. Not in shock. That emotion had burned out long ago. What I felt instead was precision. My plan accelerated in my mind like a machine firing into place. The final piece had clicked. She had torn down my name to boost her ego. In front of someone who, intentionally or not, exposed the real truth. Not only had Rachel tried to humiliate me, but the lie didn't even hold up under casual scrutiny. And that, being both betrayed and ridiculous, was the worst fate she could imagine. I almost pitied her. Almost. I turned and walked out without a sound. Left the house without either of them knowing. And I stayed gone the entire night. No calls. No texts. Just cold, strategic silence. When I returned the next morning, she was on the couch, eyes puffy, mascara smeared. She didn't say a word. Just looked at me as if trying to gauge how much I'd heard. I gave her nothing. Not even a glance. Because by then, I had already filed for divorce. And in 2 days, the papers would arrive. 2 days later, the papers arrived by courier. Neatly sealed. No theatrics. No pre-warning. Just a quiet envelope handed to her at 11:15 a.m., while she was still in her robe, sipping coffee in the kitchen she used to command like a throne. I watched from the hallway, silent. Her fingers trembled as she signed for it. The smile she tried to give the delivery guy cracked before it even formed. She looked down at the envelope and saw my name printed next to the words, Petitioner. And that was the moment she realized. I wasn't bluffing. I wasn't sulking. I wasn't punishing. I was done. She called out to me, her voice rising like smoke from a fire she hadn't seen coming. What is this? Are you kidding me, Alex? I didn't respond. Just walked into my office, closed the door, and sat down at my desk like it was any other Tuesday. She knocked once. Then again. Harder. When I didn't open, she raised her voice, accusing, then pleading, then whimpering. I let it all pass through the walls. I had nothing left to say. That evening, she tried again, this time softer. She made dinner. Tried to act like everything was fine. That maybe this was just some power play I'd cave on. I sat down, looked at the food, and stood up without taking a bite. My silence spoke louder than any speech she expected. No anger. No scenes. Just surgical removal. I slept like a stone that night. By morning, her voice had changed. No more confidence. No more sharp remarks or smug glances. She was studying me now, watching for any sign of return. But there was none. I was past the line of no return. What she didn't know was that I'd already locked down the finances. She had no access to my accounts. The joint card was canceled. The car title had been transferred. The apartment we shared? I'd negotiated to keep it in the settlement. She was about to become a guest in what used to be her world. That afternoon, I handed her a printed copy of the division agreement. Review it. Sign it. Or contest it in court, I said. No emotion. No hesitation. Just facts. She stared at the paper like it was a foreign language. And maybe it was. Because everything she thought she controlled, me, the house, the narrative, was slipping away one line at a time. She asked, barely above a whisper, "Why are you doing this?" I looked her dead in the eye and said, "Because you taught me exactly what not being wanted feels like." Then I turned and left her standing there, holding a life she'd broken with her own hands. The first night after handing her the division agreement, she didn't sleep in our bedroom. Not because I told her not to, but because she couldn't. She paced the hallway like a ghost stuck between dimensions. I heard her opening drawers, shifting papers, walking to the kitchen and back like she was hunting for something she'd lost but didn't know how to name. that something was control. She lost it the moment she turned our marriage into a transaction. The next morning, I found her sitting at the kitchen table, still in the clothes from the day before. No makeup, hair tangled, eyes puffy. There was a folded piece of paper in front of her, and when I approached, she slid it across to me like it was a secret. It was a handwritten apology, long, wordy, filled with excuses masked as regret. She said she didn't mean it when she called me inadequate, that she was just stressed, that it was the hormones, the pressure, and you know how women sometimes say things they don't mean. I didn't say a word. I read it once. Then I folded it, placed it back on the table, and walked out the front door without looking back. She had already said everything that needed to be said months ago. She just never expected I'd listen long enough to act on it. She started texting again. One message, then another. By lunchtime, it was a chain of half-truths, half-promises, desperate justifications wrapped in emotional theater. At 3:14 p.m., she texted, "I'm sorry. I miss you. Can we talk?" I read it, then archived the thread. My silence was no longer a reaction, it was a boundary. That evening, I returned home to find her cooking dinner again. This time, steak, the same meal I cooked on our 3rd anniversary, when she spent half the evening scrolling on her phone. Now, she was setting the table for 2, candles lit, as if that could erase the years she spent making me feel like a burden in my own home. She smiled weakly and said she wanted to start over. I walked past the table without slowing down, straight into my office. Behind the door, I could hear her plate her own food and eat alone. I didn't lock the door. I didn't need to. She knew better now. Around midnight, I heard her cry. Quiet at first, then louder. It wasn't the sound of guilt. It was the sound of panic, the kind that only hits when the other person stops reacting. She realized the man she thought would always be there wasn't watching anymore. He wasn't waiting for her to change. He was gone. The body was there, yes. But the presence? The love? The patience? That was cut off at the root. And I wasn't angry. I wasn't cold. I was simply clear. By the 3rd day, the silence had settled like a storm cloud that refused to move. It didn't shout, it didn't rage, it just hovered. She moved through the house differently now. Slower. More careful. Like she finally understood this wasn't a fight she could win with emotion. She was used to breaking down and being comforted, crying and being hurt. But I wasn't offering that anymore. What she broke would not be glued back together with trembling hands and guilty whispers. That morning, I closed the joint bank account, transferred everything to my own. I'd already given her a clean split in the papers, fair, even generous. But I wasn't about to keep one financial vein open for her to bleed convenience from. I also canceled every card tied to my name. And when she tried to pay for groceries later that afternoon, the cashier handed her the declined receipt. She came home, quiet, sat on the couch, looked at me like she was waiting for me to ask. I didn't. She tried to bring up memories next. Good ones. "Do you remember that cabin in Vermont?" she said softly one night. "You built that fire in the snow. I couldn't feel my hands, but you kept me warm the whole night." I nodded, not out of sentiment, out of record. I remembered. But what she didn't say out loud was that even in that memory, she still brought her laptop, still checked her emails, still answered a call from her boss in the middle of dinner. She remembered warmth. I remembered cold. I changed the locks 2 days later. Didn't announce it. Just did it. She was out with her sister, trying to gather support, maybe hoping someone would help her find a crack in the wall I'd built. When she came back, and the key didn't work, she knocked. I opened. Silent. She looked shocked, like she expected me to beg her to stay. Instead, I handed her a copy of the new key and said, "For now." The message landed harder than any screen. She moved her things into the guest room that night. No discussion. No ceremony. Just quiet acceptance. She knew she was a visitor in her own home now. Not because I pushed her out, but because she pushed me too far for too long. I no longer occupied the role of husband. I was something else now. Something she didn't recognize. Not angry. Not cold. Just exact. She used to control the rhythm of our house. Now, she couldn't predict a single beat. She cooked. I ate later. She spoke. I blinked. She reached. I stayed still. It was like watching someone try to grab Fock. The more she reached, the more empty her hands became. She thought I would yell. She thought I would explode. She thought I would beg. But the man who might have done that? He was dead. After she moved into the guest room, the energy in the house changed. It wasn't a war zone. It was worse. It was sterile. 2 ghosts living under one roof. haunting separate timelines. She tried, subtly, to inject pieces of her old self back into the day-to-day. Light laughter when she passed by. Soft touches on my arm when handing over the mail. A plate of food left at my desk. But none of it landed. None of it stuck. That version of me, the one who might have seen those gestures as signs of peace, was no longer home. She started shrinking. I could feel it. Like she didn't want to take up space anymore. Her makeup stopped appearing on the bathroom counter. Her voice, once sharp and constant, was now barely audible when she answered phone calls. She walked softer, opened doors slower, like even noise had become too bold for her new reality. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate her quiet. But I also didn't break it. Instead, I began expanding. I reconnected with the world beyond our walls. Canceled every upcoming couple commitment, brunches, dinners, group trips. Reached out to friends I hadn't seen in years. Grabbed beers with college buddies who remembered who I was before I shrunk myself for someone else's schedule. I started waking up earlier, working out again, running long enough to outrun the old patterns. I upgraded my wardrobe. Not out of vanity, but precision. I wanted to reflect who I was becoming, someone who no longer waited to be prioritized. She noticed. She asked where I was going one Saturday morning, the first time I wore a button-down in months. I said nothing, just looked at her. She nodded, looked away. The silence did the rest. Later that evening, I found her sitting in the dark, holding an old photo of us. Her thumb kept grazing the edge like she was trying to feel something that was no longer there. She didn't cry. That would have been too easy. She just stared, like maybe if she focused hard enough, the photo would turn into a mirror and show her who she used to be. I didn't interrupt her. Instead, I went to my study and opened the folder labeled Exit Plan. I'd been building it in silence, document after document, contact after contact. Realtor, lawyer, therapist, new address. Each piece of the future laid out with surgical calm. I wasn't walking away in chaos. I was stepping into clarity. She was unraveling, but I was rebuilding. She was looking back. I was stepping forward. By the time she woke up that morning, everything had already changed. I was sitting at the kitchen table, fully dressed, sipping black coffee like it was any ordinary day. But it wasn't. The locksmith had already come and gone. Every lock in the house had been replaced. I had rehearsed it all down to the second, cold, precise, quiet. She walked to the front door like usual, still groggy, holding her phone and mumbling something about work. Her key didn't fit. She paused, tried again, then again, and again. That moment, when her key failed her, was the quietest revenge I could have delivered. She turned around, confused, looking at me like I was the one who had changed. But I hadn't changed. I had simply decided I was done pretending she was still my home. I stood, walked over, and handed her a sealed envelope. She didn't open it immediately, just stared. I didn't explain. I didn't raise my voice. I simply said, "Everything you need is inside. You have until noon." Inside the envelope were final decisions, a list of items she could take, a prepaid hotel booked for 2 nights, a key to a storage unit where her belongings would be delivered, and a lawyer's letter outlining the divorce process already underway. Not a conversation. Not a discussion. A blueprint for exit. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. Not then. She just walked out, like she was waiting to wake up from a dream she no longer controlled. And I shut the door behind her, not loud, not slamming, just enough for her to know it wouldn't open again. What came next was the purge. I went through the house like a surgeon. Everything she had touched was removed or replaced. Her cosmetics. Her framed notes. That ridiculous throw pillow she loved. Gone. The sheets changed. The Spotify account unlinked. Her scent still lingered in corners, but it wouldn't last. I opened every window wide, not for air, but to let the past escape. When she texted later, I didn't read. When she called, I didn't pick up. When mutual friends tried to mediate, I shut it down. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I was done. The strength wasn't in the act. It was in the silence that followed it. For the first time in years, I walked through my home and didn't feel like a stranger. And somewhere across the city, she sat in a rented room, reading the consequences of her own betrayal printed on white paper in black ink. She always said I was too calm. I guess she was right. 2 days after she left, her number was still blocked. Her email sat unread, buried in a folder I no longer opened. But I knew her next move before she did. Predictability had always been her weakness, emotion disguised as logic, tears weaponized as strategy. She thought distance would soften me. That silence would make me reconsider. that I was playing a temporary game of pride. But she had mistaken absence for hesitation. What I gave her was exile. She tried through friends, the ones who hadn't already chosen sides. Texts came in from Jason, from Leah, from her sister. She's sorry, she's broken, you should talk once. I didn't answer. Not because I couldn't, but because I had already chosen peace over her presence. And peace doesn't negotiate. She sent a letter. A real one. Handwritten, trembling cursive. I recognized the paper from that overpriced stationery store she once dragged me to. Inside, her words danced between guilt and nostalgia. I made a mistake. We can fix this. You were always my home. It was the kind of letter that used to shatter me. Now it just sat there, unopened for hours, like an old receipt from a meal that left me sick. I finally read it, once, then burned it. The fire didn't roar. It whispered. And that was enough. What she hadn't realized, or maybe refused to, was that her betrayal wasn't just the act. It was the erosion of something I had protected with loyalty. I wasn't punishing her. I was preserving myself. And she wasn't just out of my house. She was out of my story. I went further. Sold the car that had her perfume embedded in the seats. Deleted joint accounts. Canceled the couple's vacation we had planned 6 months earlier. I didn't ask for refunds. I asked for closure. The last move was the email. One single message. Sent to her lawyer. All communication goes through legal channels only from now on. That was it. That was my goodbye, not spoken, not signed. Just implemented. People expected rage. Some expected tears. But my transformation wasn't loud. It was exact. And nothing terrifies the guilty more than someone they thought they broke, rebuilding without them. She tried to find the crack. She found a wall. The day the divorce finalized, I didn't mark it. No whiskey. No celebration. No text to anyone. Just a quiet Tuesday morning, coffee brewed at 6:10 a.m., as usual. I read the confirmation email, archived it, and returned to my to-do list. Nothing dramatic. Nothing staged. That's what made it real. A week later, I saw her. Not planned, just the universe playing one of its cold games. I was at the marina, meeting a client. She was walking with someone. Some man, younger, trying hard to look older. Holding her hand like he'd won something. She looked smaller. Not physically, but reduced. Like life had taken sandpaper to her edges. She didn't see me at first. But when she did, that pause, that half-second hesitation in her step, told me everything I needed. Her eyes scanned my face like they were expecting a trace of the man she left. The one who used to break at her silence. The one who used to beg for clarity. For answers. But I gave her none. I just nodded. Cold. Respectful. Distant. And then I turned my back to her, mid-glance. Walked away before she could speak. Left her standing there, her lips parted, a half-word stuck in her throat. That moment wasn't revenge. It was resurrection. People like her fear confrontation less than irrelevance. They know how to handle rage. They're prepared for shouting, accusations, chaos. But what they can't survive is being met with indifference. With a version of you that no longer needs closure. Because the chapter isn't unfinished, it's rewritten without them. I moved cities after that. Bought a condo with no shared memories. Minimalist. Clean. Every object had purpose. Every drawer opened without ghosts inside. I took up night runs. Cut my phone list by half. New gym. New clients. New rules. I became someone she no longer had access to, not emotionally, not digitally, not geographically. She could Google me, sure. But that man she'd find wasn't built for her return. And I never told anyone about that moment at the marina. Because it wasn't a story. It was an ending. The kind of ending that doesn't echo with noise. It ends in silence. And that silence was the answer she feared most. Real men don't explode. They exit. Subscribe for more power stories.